A bleak fate for the children of the world. UNICEF is warning more than 200 million will die or be living in poverty within the next 15 years if they don't get help. Now, what needs to be done to save them, and who's to blame for their plight? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Martine. Now, invest in children now or allow our world to become still more unequal and divided. That's a message coming from the head of the UN's children agency, UNICEF. It's warning that if world leaders don't address global inequality, 69 million youngsters under the age of 5 will die from preventable causes by the year 2030. Now, in a report that paints a grim picture of the future prospects of the world's most disadvantaged kids, UNICEF says 167 million children are expected to be living in poverty by 2030. And by that time, 750 million women will have been married when they were children. UNICEF says education is critical to ending recurring cycles of poverty, but some 124 million children don't currently go to primary or lower secondary school. But some progress is being made. Global mortality rates for under 5s have halved since the 1990s. And boys and girls attend primary schools in equal numbers in 129 countries. Many in the war-ravaged Syrian city of Aleppo, going to school is often impossible, but several groups have found a new way to give Aleppo's youngest an opportunity to simply be kids. Before we bring in our guests, Reza Sayar has this report.
Allah Mushamiya can be many things. Here, Allah is a poet reciting a poem that calls for peace. Here, she's an actress, playing the part of a girl consoling a victim of war. And here, she's simply doing what kids do best, playing. For children like Allah, acting, singing, and playing isn't unusual. But where she's doing it is extraordinary. Allah and close to 300 children take part in these activities underground in the city of Aleppo.
The first time I came here, I was happy because we play, have fun, and it's safer because outside when the warplanes come, there's no place to hide.
Warplanes and 5 years of fighting have ravaged Aleppo. For children, it's too risky to play outside. That's why in recent months, activists and aid groups have set up playgrounds like this, hidden in basements and underground shelters.
The children feel good here because it's a safe place to have fun. These days they have nowhere to go. Not even their own yards are safe.
It took 2 months for activists to set up this underground facility called Space for Hope, where children give life to paper caterpillars in art class, learn how to use the internet in a computer lab, and listen to stories about the Prophet Muhammad in reading class.
When I first came here, I didn't know what to think. Then I had fun and started coming every day.
Space for Hope also provides therapists and innovative teaching techniques where children learn by moving their bodies instead of listening to lectures. Allah says she's grateful for this sanctuary for kids, but she still longs to play without having to take cover.
I wish we could have a place like this, but outside with nature.
Aid workers from 2 charities tell Al Jazeera that it's tougher than ever to get toys, school items, and money into Syria. Even so, they say they're pushing to build several more underground playgrounds. For Syrian children trapped in the fighting in Aleppo, it remains their only chance to play. Reza Sayar, Al Jazeera, Gaziantep, along the Turkish-Syrian border.
All right, let's bring in our guests now. Joining us from Abuja, Hussaini Abdu, who is Country Director of Plan International Nigeria. In Nairobi, we have Jennifer Kaberi, Coordinator for the Children Agenda Forum, Kenya. And in London, Kevin Watkins, Executive Director of the Overseas Development Institute and lead author of this report. Welcome to you all. Kevin, can I start with you to find out a little bit more about how you compiled this report? You surveyed every country in the world?
Well, the data in the report draws on statistics from UNICEF, the UN Children's Agency, which monitors on an annual basis trends in child mortality, from other UN agencies on education. And in the case of the child poverty data that you cited earlier, we've drawn on a range of sources, including household survey data that looks at birth rates among women who are living in poverty, and demographic and population growth data. So there's a pretty wide range of sources, many of them national as well as international data sources.
And how does this picture, this rather bleak picture that you paint in the report, how does it compare with previous years?
Well, you say it's a bleak picture, and that's right. There are many aspects of the picture that are bleak. But the background is actually quite encouraging. We've seen this very dramatic reduction in child death since the early 1990s, actually, but accelerating since 2000. Since the death rate, or the number of deaths among under 5 children, has fallen from over 10 million 15 years ago to just under 6 million today. That's a very dramatic decline by historic standards. Many of the old killers, measles, HIV/AIDS, pneumonia, we're seeing quite steep reductions in death rates among children. So the backdrop there is encouraging. We've seen the out of school numbers come down from over 100 million back in 2000 to around 60 million today. That's for primary school age children. Now, that's an outrageous number. In the midst of the knowledge age, there are still 60 million kids who don't even get a foot on the first rung of the education ladder. But nonetheless, there has been progress. And I think that the point that we're trying to make in this report is that there are two futures that are possible here. There's one future which would see us achieve the targets that have been set for 2030, a world free of poverty, a world in which there are no avoidable child deaths, a world in which every child gets an opportunity to realize their potential through education. But there's another there's another scenario in which we carry on as we are, in which we fail to tackle these deep inequalities linked to gender, the wealth of parents, where kids happen to live. And if we carry on this road, we're going to reach the future that you described right at the outset, and that would indeed be a very bleak outcome for the world's children.
All right, let's now open this up to our other guest, Hussaini, who's in Abuja. Now, 80% of all these preventable deaths that have been highlighted in this report occur in either South Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa. And of that 80%, half of those deaths from preventable diseases are in India, Nigeria, Pakistan, Congo and Ethiopia. You're in Nigeria. Give us an idea of what contributes primarily to child poverty and to the distress surrounding so many kids, particularly under 5 in Nigeria.
Well, I think I'll start by actually thanking UNICEF for underscoring these very important issues that we have been battling with in this region. And I think the report did come up at the right time, coming in the first year of the implementation of SDG, and also coming up at a time that the world is beginning to rediscuss its development model and the challenges that most poorer societies are facing.
All right.
About a decade ago, when people raised issues around
can I just get you to, just to try to avoid using acronyms, SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. These are goals that everybody agreed with the UN to achieve, or at least to try to achieve by the year 2030. So just to explain this SDG measure that we often use.
Absolutely. So this report for me comes in more like a baseline on some of the challenges that we are dealing with, and possibly in the next 15 years, we should be assessing the progress we are making based on some of the key issues and so statistics that have been presented here. The challenge actually is that whereas the world did experience some level of growth or development in the last 2 decades or a decade and a half, the level of such growth and development is quite limited in sub-Saharan Africa. Of course, there was a time that there were all conversation around African rising, but the reality actually is that Africa was rising for a particular class of people, and Africa was actually deepening in poverty for another set of people. And that is where the conversation on inequality becomes very important. And so along the line, we have seen deepening poverty even when other parts of the world as well actually was growing. In Africa, we've seen increasing wars in different locations, including in my own country. The Boko Haram situation has been a major source in the development of the country and has been a huge challenge and opportunity for the violation of the rights of children and the level of abuse and exposure that children have received in the last few years occasioned by this violence has been quite unimaginable.
All right, let's go now to Jennifer in Nairobi, and there we've heard from Hussaini about the crucial role that conflict can play in the life's chances of a child. Give us an idea of what the situation is like in Kenya, because you have a very high level of enrolment. About 90% of children are enrolled in primary schools, which is something to be celebrated.
I can say this is it's something that the government, the former government, the Kibaki government did, which was a high in the children's sector, making primary school 100% free. This has seen an increase in the number of children coming into school. However, you see, for example, I think in 2013, 2014, there were about 700 children who graduated from primary to high school. However, only 250,000 of them went to high school. So from primary, there's a huge gap there. But we can say at least a majority of children are being able to go to primary school. They can get basic education up to standard 8. That's basic primary education, but there's a gap of them going to high school and further going to college.
Okay, and Kevin, I mean, just to reiterate the significance of the report that is carried out on a regular basis, the condition of a society's children is an indicator of larger issues affecting a society.
That's right. You know, I think anyone who's a parent, anyone who looks at their own society can immediately understand one thing, which is that if children are raised in poverty, if children are subjected to very high levels of inequality with respect to their most basic opportunities, their opportunity to get immunized, their opportunity to get a health check, their opportunity to get into school and to learn to read and write, that if you can't tackle those disparities in opportunity in childhood, you're heading for highly unequal societies in the future. And the point of our report, in a way, is to make the point that it's not just that this is unethical, it's morally wrong, and it's unacceptable that so many children are denied a fair chance in life, including a chance to stay alive. You know, that if you're born in Kenya to a poor parent, it triples your risk of dying before the age of 5. So yeah, that's a fundamental unfairness. But inequality is also terribly inefficient for the whole of society. You know, that if you write off the potential of half of your population because they happen to be born as girls, or a big chunk of your population for no better reason that they were born to a poor parent, you're eroding the human capital, if you like, the potential of your society in the future to generate the jobs, to attract the investment, to drive the economic growth that will benefit the whole of society. So, you know, we're dealing with something which is ethically indefensible and economically irresponsible if we don't tackle these deep underlying inequalities.
And Hussaini, coming back to you in Nigeria, what about this figure of 750 million women by the year 2030 will have been married as children. Now, how far is that a situation that affects Nigerian girls? And are you able to quantify the net damage that has for Nigerian society?
Yeah, I think that's also a major issue, particularly for girls. Not just Nigeria. It's part of a regional problem in most parts of West Africa. Child marriage is a major issue, whether you're talking about Niger or you're talking about Nigeria, particularly the northern part of Nigeria, or you're talking about Burkina Faso. They are different across West Africa. And even though in Nigeria, if we check the ratio, it could be relatively small, maybe compared to Niger. But if you look at the absolute number for Nigeria because of the size of the country, it's quite a huge amount of children every year are subjected to early marriage. And what the report is reminding us is if we continue with this current trend and there is no massive reaction to this situation, to protect these girls, ensure that they are better educated, ensure that they have access to good health facilities through healthy life or healthy start, that we may be running into this very serious situation. But the challenge, of course, is that when you send a child out there on marriage, you damage the child completely from all the basic economic activities that this particular girl would have been able to contribute to the development of the society. So you don't have good education because she's been sent out of marriage. And quite often, this level of child marriage is also deeply perpetrated and within among the poor segment of the society. And therefore, it goes around that same vicious circle that, okay, the mother married as a child, and therefore, in this very unequal society of ours, the children also married as children, and it goes on that kind of circle. And at the end of the day, you end up building a very huge cast of poverty and inequality that if we don't break that circle, we'll continue to wallow in this whole concept of child poverty.
And Jennifer in Nairobi, how far is the contribution of government? How critical is it for the reduction of poverty, particularly pertaining to children? And your particular government right now, how far do you feel their commitment is? And are you seeing any manifestation of that in a positive way?
For starters, the government is the right holder. He's the one that is responsible ensuring that every child in Kenya or even in the world is enjoying their rights. And so it's their responsibility. It's actually 100% government's responsibility to ensure that children are enjoying their rights. About Kenyan government, I can say they are trying. However, there's a huge gap when it comes to financing. My colleague has just mentioned about sustainable development goals. For me, I believe sustainable development goals is an opportunity for us to be able to give children a fresh start, at least for this generation, for our generation, is for us to give a fresh start. And during the conference in Addis on financing for development, they said for sustainable development goals to be really sustainable, they have to be funded by government. And for me, the sustainable development goals are for children. And if when government is not funding, when it's not supporting, when it's not investing in children, that becomes a challenge. For example, in Kenya right now, the percentage for the year 2016-2017 budget that has been allocated for children is very little compared to some other projects. Yes, it is good to have good roads, it's good to have good bridges, it's good to have all these nice things. But research has shown if you invest in a child, it has bigger returns than just investing on roads. Because you invest on a child, that child is going to become an engineer and come up with more innovative ways of building that road. That child will be able to know how to make that road stay longer, or it becomes more durable than making just investing on a road and then it is gone. So for me, the government in Kenya, it is trying. It's trying. And then on policies, policies, you cannot talk about children without having policies.
So the Kenyan government is trying. Now, Kevin, We've talked a little bit about two particular African examples, haven't we? But South Asia also comes in for a lot of attention in this report, because that is where an awful lot of the children who are least advantaged actually live. And I'm thinking of India now in particular. How do you square the appalling conditions that so many Indian kids live in and the lack of opportunity? Their life remains nasty, brutish and short, doesn't it? How do you square that with, say, an Indian government space programme, which they seem to be applying quite a lot of certainly finances into, as well as energies? How do you square that in terms of priorities?
Well, you're right. The South Asian area is a very interesting one for the issues that we cover in the report, because you have a country like Bangladesh, which has been growing economically much more slowly than India, which is far poorer than India, and yet which has overtaken India on child survival, on nutrition, on many measures of gender equity. So Bangladesh has demonstrated there's more to achieving equity than just having high rates of economic growth. And if you compare Bangladesh with India, just to give you one statistic, if you happen to be a woman living in the poorest 20% in India, maybe a tribal woman living in a poor state like Bihar, you're 1/6 as likely to get antenatal care and a skilled birth attendant at the birth of your child as a woman in the richest 20%. And what that one statistic captures is the underlying inequality in the health system, because it's the poorest women who are most vulnerable, who are most in need of health care, and who are by some distance the least likely to get that health care. And what India is suffering from is really two things, which is chronic underinvestment in the health system and in the basic education system as well, and very high levels of inequality in the way that it allocates what are inadequate resources. India is one poor example. Bangladesh is a good example of how it can be done. Another, unfortunately, very bad example is Pakistan, which now accounts for more out-of-school children than any other country in the world, has some of the worst indicators in child survival and some of the deepest inequalities. And unfortunately, it's the inequalities that are driving these very limited outcomes.
And Hussaini in Abuja, I've asked Jennifer about her view of the Kenyan government's approach to the whole issue of child poverty. What about the Nigerian government? We know that you have a huge economic crisis underway. You've got the insurgency of Boko Haram, not to mention the other challenges in the south of the country. How is the government approaching this issue?
I think sometimes, yes, you could have strong policy frameworks that support certain child protection initiatives. But once it is not properly enforced or funded, it becomes a huge challenge. For instance, Nigeria has a universal basic education laws, which makes education free for children from primary up to junior secondary school level. But today in the country, we have more than 10.5 million children out of school. And then what are we doing? What is the government doing in its reaction to such thing? You don't see it. Nigeria has actually ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It has actually enacted the law into the law by the National Assembly. But more than half of the Nigerian states have actually, out of the 36 states, have refused to domesticate those laws in their respective states. And therefore, the basic instrument that's supposed to have been used to protect these children, you don't have it. We have the country is supposed to have developed a strong social protection that could actually protect vulnerable children from some of those systems. Yes, conversations are going on in the country in terms of building a very good social protection system. UNICEF have been leading that conversation, and that's quite encouraging. But it's still yet to actually pick up in terms of providing the requisite conditions and protections for children. So Nigerian children are exposed to different kinds of violations. Currently, the level of infant mortality is one of the highest you have in the region. The lack of access to education is also one of the highest.
I get the overall picture, Hussaini, that the Nigerian government could do better. At that point, I have to end it now. We've run out of time. But thank you very much indeed. Hussaini Abdu in Abuja, thank you very much. Jennifer Kaberi in Nairobi, thank you very much. and Kevin Watkins in London. Thank you all very much indeed. And as ever, thank you for watching the programme. You can see it again anytime you like by going to the website aljazeera.com. For more discussion, should you want it, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And there's always the Twitter sphere, our handle @AJ Inside Story. But from me, Martine Dennis, and the whole team here in Doha, it's bye for now.